Well, good morning, church family. Today we're going to be looking at the book of Numbers. We're going to try and cover the whole book in one lesson. So we will be skimming through parts, and we may skip some parts entirely, but I do hope that you can learn something this morning. You take something from the Word of God. So let's open with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you that we have your word so freely available to us, Lord. And thank you for your word and that we can study it and draw closer to you, Lord. I pray for wisdom this morning as we do study this book of Numbers. And I pray that you'll give me the words to speak, Lord. In your name, amen. So where does this book begin? It begins in the wilderness of Sinai. The children of Israel have been out of Egypt a bit over 2 years. How do I know this? I read the very first verse, so let's read that together. And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of the congregation on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt. So that's where I got that one from. Then we see Numbers goes through a census. It goes through another one later in the book as well with the new generation. We see Numbers, the children of Israel are preparing for their journey to the promised land. We see their journey gets delayed, I guess, due to their lack of faith and their disobedience. The Lord punishes them. And we see the next generation of Israelites towards the end of the book. And we see Moses sort of hands the baton to Joshua, or he doesn't quite hand it on, but we see that Joshua gets anointed by the Lord. So where does it end? It ends in the plains of Moab by Jericho. And how do I know that one? I read the final verse in the book of Numbers. So let's go there, Numbers chapter 36, verse 13. These are the commandments and the judgments which the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses unto the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho. So that's the first and last verse done. So Sunday school is now finished. Well, let's go back and cover it in a bit more detail, I guess. So let's go back to the start. We'll look briefly at the census. There's going to be a bit of information here. I apologise for that. You may get lost in the numbers. I won't read all the numbers of all the different tribes out to you, and I definitely won't be reading all the names out to you. I'll get a lot of them wrong. But let's continue reading from verse 2 of chapter 1. So the Lord is speaking to Moses, and he says, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families, by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. From 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. And with you there shall be a man of every tribe, every one head of the house of his fathers. So we see they're counting every male from 20 years onwards. It also says every male that is able to go forth to war. So it probably doesn't include the elderly there. And we also see in verse 4 that there's a man from every tribe present for this counting. So I don't know if that's an accountability thing or if it's simply just to help with the counting, as there is a lot of men to count. We see chapter 1 goes through all the different tribes and how many are in each tribe. I won't read that to you. You guys can do that in your own time. But we do see the total numbering over 600,000. Now this doesn't include the Levites. They're counted separately. We'll get to them shortly. So there's over 600,000 men who are able to go forth to war. I would imagine that means if you include the women and the children and the elderly, that you're talking about a couple of million Israelites out there in the wilderness of Sinai. That's a lot. That is one ginormous camp. Chapter 2, we look at how they are camped. So we'll look into that a bit. So we see the Levites, we see in chapter 2 that the Lord divides them into 5 groups, 5 camps. So the camp of Levi is in the centre of the camp. And we see, if we jump forward to chapter 3, we see that the Levites total about 22,000 males, but they are counted from 1 month old and upward. So different to the rest of the Israelites, but there's 22,000 males of the Levites there in the centre of the camp. Now, the camp of Judah was on the east side, and we see the camp of Judah. The camp of Judah numbered over 186,000, so they're on the east side. So just bear with me for one moment. I want you to try and picture this in your head. Levites in the middle, 22,000. The camp of Judah is on the east. The camp of Judah includes the tribes of Judah, Issachar, and Zebulon. They total over 186,000. That's on the east. The camp of Ephraim is on the west. Now, the camp of Ephraim includes the tribes of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, and they number 108,000. So you think you're balancing a seesaw, you've got 186,000 as opposed to 108,000. One's a fair bit bigger than the other one. Now, if we go to the camp of Reuben, shall be on the south side. The camp of Reuben includes the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And the camp of Reuben numbers just over 151,000. So that's sort of in between. 186 on one side, 108 on the other side, 151 on the south. And opposite that tribe is the camp of Dan. Now, the camp of Dan includes the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali, and they total 157,000. So they're quite similar to the camp of Reuben. The reason why I say all this, I read out the numbers and go through where they're camped, is because I saw from another preacher, he pointed this out, and he had a slideshow, which I do not have, so you're just going to have to picture it in your head. But if you see them all camped out like that with Levites in the middle, and then you've got Judah on the east, opposite Judah is Ephraim, and then you've got Reuben on the south, and opposite Reuben is the camp of Dan, and the numbers of people there, and you look at it from a bird's eye view, you'd be looking at a picture of the cross, which I thought was pretty incredible, which is why I wanted to share that with you this morning. Just goes to show that the amount of detail in here, we could never truly understand everything in this book. We would never even get close. There's a lot of little things the Lord puts in there that we will never really understand. But anyway, let's keep moving forward. So if we look at chapters 3 and 4, they talk more on the Levites. Like I said before, the Levites are numbered at the start of chapter 3. It goes through a lot of the duties of the Levites and the different families there. It goes through the duties of Aaron and his sons. And then we get to chapter 5. We see a commandment to cleanse the camp. The lepers are put out. Anyone defiled by the dead is put out. We see from chapters 5 through to 9, we see a few laws given in detail. We also see a lot of different offerings that are required of the Israelites. And we see when they're to observe the Passover, we see some rules on some laws regarding a Nazirite as well. We do see one little blessing in here that I'd just like to stop and pause on for a minute as well, that I know can be an encouragement to you. And most of us will have read it before. But let's just go to Numbers chapter 6, verse 22. It is a promise to the children of Israel, but it's a promise to us as well from the Lord. Numbers chapter 6, verses 22. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Now I just pause there because it's a beautiful promise that the Lord makes to the children of Israel. As we move through the book, we'll see a bit of the opposite, where the Lord wishes to smite the Israelites because of their disobedience. So it's interesting that it starts, before they start on their journey, we see this promise to the Israelites. So let's continue on. We're going to skip through to midway through chapter 9. So after we've gone through a fair few of the offerings, we go through Passover at the start of chapter 9, when to observe Passover, when those that are defiled can observe Passover later, the rules regarding that. And then we get to the cloud and the fire. So I want to read this from Numbers chapter 9, verse 15. And on the day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony. And at even there was upon the tabernacle, as it were, the appearance of fire until the morning. So we see that the cloud covered the tabernacle on the day, and we see the appearance of fire from the evening through until the morning. So let's keep reading. So it was always, the cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then after the children of Israel journeyed, and in the place where the cloud abode, there the children of Israel pitched their tents. So we see the purpose of the cloud and the fire. We know that the Israelites were to follow that cloud or follow that fire. If it stopped over the tabernacle, they were to stop. So at the commandment of the Lord, the children of Israel journeyed, and at the commandment of the Lord, they pitched. As long as the cloud abode upon the tabernacle, they rested in their tents. And when the cloud tarried long upon the tabernacle many days, then the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and journeyed not. So we continue reading, we're up to verse 20. And so it was, when the cloud was a few days upon the tabernacle, according to the commandment of the Lord, they abode in their tents, and according to the commandment of the Lord, they journeyed. And so it was, when the cloud abode from even unto the morning, and that the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they journeyed. Whether it was by day or by night that the cloud was taken up, they journeyed. Or whether it were 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud tarried upon the tabernacle, remaining there on, the children of Israel abode in their tents and journeyed not. But when it was taken up, they journeyed. At the commandment of the Lord they rested in their tents, and at the commandment of the Lord they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the commandment of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Now we see lots of these, little gems of wisdom in the Old Testament. It's written for the children of Israel, but it's very true to us today. It's true to any generation throughout history. We see that the Israelites were to journey when the Lord commanded, and they were to stop and pitch their tents when the Lord commanded. We see in verse 21 where it says whether it was by day. Oh, wrong verse. Verse 22. Or whether it were 2 days or a month or a year that the cloud tarried upon the tabernacle. We need to remember that in our lives. Sometimes we get in our head a plan. It could be a good plan. It could be something good that we think we need to go and do. And it might even be something that God would have us do, but just not at that point in time. He would have us pitch our tents, stop where we are, and we need to be able to listen to God and obey him when he says that. And on the contrary, if he calls us to go and do something, we need to go and do it when he calls us to do it. So I think that's a extremely important lesson in that. It is a lesson. It's something so simple, just an instruction to how the Israelites should move, how they should journey, when they should journey. But it's got some truths in there for us today. Oh, let's carry on to where the Israelites actually begin the journey. So we'll go through to chapter 10. We see midway through chapter 10, the journey to the promised land begins. So chapter 10, verse 11, and it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year. Let's just pause there, go back to the very first verse. We see the census was counted on the first day of the second month in the second year. This is the 20th day of the second month in the second year. So this is 20 days later. That means, you guys might not care, but I found it interesting. In 20 days, these guys counted over 600,000 people, which is pretty incredible. So anyway, that might just be a useless bit of information for you, but let's keep reading. So in the second year that the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle of the testimony, and the children of Israel took their journeys out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And they first took their journey according to the commandment of the Lord by the hand of Moses. So we see them begin their journey, and flick over to chapter 11. We see that it doesn't take the Israelites very long to start their murmuring and complaining. So we're going to look a bit about that, but I know Shane covered some of that in Exodus. I'm not going to spend too long talking about the Israelites complaining, but if we read from Numbers chapter 11, verses 1 to 3, it says, "And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched." So, like I said earlier, there was that beautiful promise from the Lord to the Israelites only a few chapters ago, and now they're on the road, and they're already complaining, and we see the Lord's anger was kindled. He was not real happy with the Israelites now. He's had I guess you could say a change of heart, if we can put it that way. So, we read through chapter 11, we see Moses complains to God. So Moses heard the people weeping and complaining, and Moses went to the Lord. I guess to say, basically, I can't do this, it's too much for him. So the Lord told Moses to gather 70 men, and we see through chapter 11 that he gathers these 70 men, and God's Spirit rests upon these 70 men, and they're there to help Moses. So we see that they prophesy. We won't spend too long on that, but if we go through to chapter 12, we see Miriam and Aaron begin to speak out against Moses because of his Ethiopian woman that he married. So even Aaron and Miriam are here speaking out against Moses. And we see Miriam become leprous, and we see she's sent out of the camp for 7 days, and the Israelites pause their journey, and once she's received back into the camp, the Israelites journey to the wilderness of Paran. So let's pick it up again in chapter 13. So this is where we see the 12 men going to spy on the land of Canaan. I'm sure there's a couple of you that know the song, 10 were bad and 2 were good. I'm not going to sing it, just thought I'd throw it out there. So you guys can sing it in your own homes while you listen to Sunday school. Well, chapter 13, verse 1, and it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men, that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall ye send a man, every one a ruler among them. And Moses, by the commandment of the Lord, sent them from the wilderness of Paran. All those men were heads of the children of Israel." So we see these 12 men go out from the wilderness of Paran into the land of Canaan, and we see they spend 40 days spying on the land, and then and we see them return. We see them return with a cluster of grapes and some other fruit. Let's read from verse 23. We're still in chapter 13, verse 23. "And they came unto the brook of Eshcol," this is the 12 spies, "and cut down from thence a branch with one cluster of grapes, and they bare it between 2 upon a staff." Now I imagine these men that were picked as spies to not be weak little men. I imagine they're quite strong. I would imagine that they could probably handle an average size bunch of grapes, but this cluster of grapes was that big that they bare it between 2 upon a staff. "And they brought of the pomegranates and of the figs." So they've brought some spoils back from the land of Canaan, and they returned after 40 days, and they gave a report. So we see the report if we keep reading. So we'll read from verse 26. "And they went, the spies went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all of the congregation of the children of Israel unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, We came unto the land whither thou sent us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it." So it starts off with a pretty good report, but we know what happens next. We keep reading. "Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it." So you see Caleb, a man of faith there. He knows that it's not about the size. It's nothing to do with the size of the fighter, the size of the army. It doesn't matter what battle you're going up against. You've got God on your side, and no one will defeat you. He knows what's been promised, and he knows that they can take it. But we read in verse 31, "But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." So they saw themselves as very small against the enemy, and were scared, no doubt. And it's easy to look back on those the ten that were bad, and look down on them. But I think we do that in our own lives a lot. God calls us to go and do something, and we might jump in all excited, and then we see the challenge in front of us, and we want to run back scared, because we forget that the Lord is all powerful, and with him we can do anything with the Lord on our side. So let's just keep reading though. We see in chapter 14, we'll read through we see in chapter 14, we won't read through the whole chapter, but we could. But we'll run out of time. So we see the congregation rises up and they murmur against Moses and against Aaron, and they say, it's interesting what they do say in verse 3 here of chapter 14. And wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? So they talk about dying in the land of Egypt. They say, would God have us die in the wilderness here? And it's interesting that they say that, because when we skip forward, we know their punishment. And yes, they will die in the wilderness. They won't see the promised land. But we see Moses and Aaron fall on their face before the congregation, and Joshua and Caleb rent their clothes, and then we see Joshua and Caleb try to explain to the children of Israel that if the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. But they don't want a bar of it, the Israelites. They're up in arms. They try to make plans to go back to Egypt. And we see the Lord gets angry once again. And we see that Moses intercedes for the children of Israel, and he talks to the Lord. They have a conversation of sorts, and then the Lord passes his punishment on Israel. And we know that punishment is that these Israelites that are there, they won't see the promised land. The next generation, their offspring, they will. But other than Caleb and Joshua, no one there will see the promised land. So we see that in Numbers 14. We will read from 29, and the Lord speaking. He says, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua the son of Nun. But your little ones, which ye said should be prey, them I will bring in, and they shall know the land which ye have despised. So we see the judgment of the Lord on the Israelites. They were oh so close to getting into the promised land, but it turned into quite a journey for them. So we're going to look through that journey. So let's jump through to chapter 16, and we see the rebellion of Korah in chapter 16. So let's start at verse 1. Now Korah the son of Izhar, the son of Kothan, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and on the son of Pelath, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. So I guess these men didn't like the power Moses had, or the role he had, I guess, as a leader of the Israelites. I'm guessing a bit of jealousy there among them. They sought after some of that power. And the Lord was angered once again. The Lord opens the ground up and consumes them. Those that are with Korah in this little rebellion, this little coup. Further on in chapter 16, the Lord sends a plague on Israel. And it's only that Moses intercedes, I guess, to stop that plague from killing more. So if we read chapter 16 from verse 46, we see, Moses said unto Aaron, Take a censer and put fire therein from off the altar, and put on incense, and go quickly unto the congregation, and make an atonement for them. For there is wrath gone out from the Lord, the plague is begun. And Aaron took as Moses commanded, and ran into the midst of the congregation, and behold, the plague was begun among the people, and he put on incense and made an atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stayed. Now they that died in the plague were 14,700, beside them that died about the matter of Korah. So that's 14,000 people died in the plague. That's not including all the ones that got eaten by the ground. And we continue to see the disobedience, the lack of faith of the Israelites. I'll tell you what, I think Moses was a very patient man. I know he did get some things wrong, but he put up with the children of Israel, all their murmurings, all their complainings. He put up with a lot as he led them through the wilderness. If we keep skimming through, we'll skip over to chapter 20. Chapter 20 is where we see Moses strikes the rock for water when he's meant to talk to the rock. And we see in chapter 20, verse 12, we see the result of that lack of belief on Moses and Aaron's behalf. Chapter 20, verse 12, And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, Because ye believed me not to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. So I guess that's his little bit of punishment as well. He does not get to go into the promised land either. Joshua will eventually take over as leader of the Israelites, and he will lead them into the promised land. We see in chapter 21, once again, the people are murmuring, they're complaining. They've had to go around the land of Edom. They tried to go through the land of Edom, but couldn't, so they've had to go around the land. And if we read from chapter 21, verse 4, And they journeyed from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea to compass the land of Edom, and the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way. And the people spake against God and against Moses, Wherefore have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? How many times do we hear that phrase? The Israelites would rather be slaves in Egypt than be out here in the wilderness. They missed their chance to see the promised land, but we know that the next generation will get there. Let's continue reading. For there is no bread, neither is there any water, for our soul loatheth this light bread. And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Therefore the people came to Moses and said, We have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against thee. Pray unto the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. And Moses prayed for the people. And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live. And Moses made the serpent of brass, and put it upon a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent had bitten any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. And we know that in John, in the New Testament, we see the reference to this that Jesus makes. Just before John 3:16, we see in John 3:14 and 15, and it says, And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. We're in the same boat as those Israelites that have been bitten by the serpent. We're destined for eternal death and hell, unless we look up and believe on the Lord Jesus Christ. Let's continue on. We see the story of Balaam in chapter 22. Balaam and his talking donkey. not the one from Shrek, the other talking donkey. Balaam was on his way to send a message that he shouldn't have been sending, and the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey. The donkey stopped and had a word with Balaam, and then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord with the sword drawn in his hand, and that's when he realised his mistake. So we keep reading on through. There's a couple of chapters there around Balaam and Balak. Balak, who wants Israel cursed, and a couple of prophecies from Balaam. We'll skip through to chapter 25. We see once again the Israelites. Chapter 25, verse 1. The Israelites are living in sin once again. And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. So we see the wrath of God once again, and we see he sends a plague. 24,000 people die in that plague. Once again, the Israelites, with their complaining, living in sin. Well, let's keep going. Chapter 26, we see, I guess the new generation here has their census. And we see Numbers 26, verses 63 to 65. We see the result of that census, because we know that none from the previous census were to enter the promised land. And we see here the new generation. Verse 63, these are they that were numbered by Moses and Eleazar, the priest, who numbered the children of Israel in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho. But among these there was not a man of them whom Moses and Aaron the priest numbered, when they numbered the children of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. That references back to the first census. So we know that not a single one, except for verse 65, it says, for the Lord had said of them, they shall surely die in the wilderness, and there was not left a man of them, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. So we see the new generation is now ready to enter the promised land. Moses is still around, but we see that in chapter 27 that Joshua is chosen by God. The Lord told Moses to take Joshua the son of Nun, in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him. So we see that choosing of Joshua. We don't see the death of Moses in the book of Numbers. The last few chapters are really about, they go through some of the feasts and offerings, and they go through a few laws. They go through how they are to take the promised land, to drive all of them out of the promised land. The Lord goes through the borders of Canaan, what those boundaries are to be, and we see also that the tribe of Reuben and the tribe of Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh receive their inheritance on the other side of the Jordan, and the other 9.5 tribes will receive their inheritance in the promised land. We also see in chapter 33, a bit of light reading for you, but there is a list of Moses wrote of their journeys throughout the wilderness, so you can, I guess, pinpoint a map of their actual journey based on that. I haven't done that for you though, so I'll leave that for you guys to do on your own, bit of homework. But that sort of comes to the end of Numbers. I did skim through the last little bit rather quickly. There's a lot in that book, but I guess if there's one thing we can really see in the book of Numbers, we see the Israelites time and time again, even after the Lord saved them out of Egypt, they forget about the power of God, they forget about the love of God, and that God will look after his people, and they complain and they want their own way, and ultimately they get punished for that. The generation that comes out of Egypt is not the generation that goes into the promised land, and that's a result of their disobedience and their lack of faith. And we can apply that in our lives today. We need to put our trust 100% in the Lord. We need to trust in him, to put our faith in him, and we need to be obedient to him and his word. So that's all I got for you this week. I hope that you could take something out of it, and hope to see you again at church soon. Bye.